The dining hall plunged into a suffocating silence, not because the music ceased, but because the impossible had occurred. Under the glacial gaze of the Mafia's elite, Isabella, the boss's mercurial fiancée, leveled a manicured finger at old man Chin. The crime? A shattered ancestral vase, its 1,000 gleaming shards littering the marble floor like a gunshot's aftermath. In this house of shadows, Isabella's fury was a death sentence. "He did it," she hissed, her red lipstick vivid against a pale, murderous mask. "Make an example of him, Yi-jun." Chin collapsed, his tears staining the Persian rug. After 40 years of loyal service to the Park family, his life hung by a thread of lies. The guards shifted, hands moving toward concealed weapons. But before the executioner could be summoned, a voice cut through the tension, firm, rhythmic, and utterly calm. "I said she's lying." The room exhaled in collective shock. All eyes turned to Nkami, a new maid who had started only 2 days ago. A woman from a world away, she stood with a spine of iron despite the trembling in her legs. "I saw it." Miss Isabella tripped on her own heel. Chin was across the room. At the head of the mahogany table, Yi-jun Park sat perfectly still. He was a man who ruled through cold calculation, a king who believed everyone eventually broke. Yet here was a nobody, acting as a human shield for an old man with nothing to offer her. His heart, long dormant, sparked with a dangerous curiosity. "You dare!" Isabella shrieked, her voice vibrating the crystal glassware. "Yi-jun, kill her." Yi-jun stood slowly, his Italian shoes crunching on the porcelain. He looked at the cruelty in his fiancée's eyes, then at the quiet dignity in Nkami's. "In my business," he said, his voice a low, terrifying silk, "I trust evidence, not words. Wolf, pull the security footage." As the truth dawned on the room, the power dynamic shifted like a tectonic plate. Isabella's face drained of color, Nkami remained unwavering. When the broken Chin later asked why she would risk her life for him, Nkami's response was simple: "Truth is like the sun. You can shut it out, but it isn't going away." In a world built on blood and secrets, a maid had just challenged a queen. The game had changed, and the ghost of Seoul was finally paying attention. 3 days earlier, Nkami had stood before the towering wrought iron gates of the Yi-jun estate, a single worn suitcase in her hand and a heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. The taxi driver had deposited her a full quarter-mile from the entrance, his fingers white-knuckled on the steering wheel. "I don't go past these gates," he'd muttered, eyes darting toward the high-definition security cameras perched atop the stone pillars. "People who work in the house of death don't always come back out to tell the tale." Nkami had paid him without a word, watching the yellow sedan pull a frantic U-turn. She began the long trek up the driveway, her footsteps crunching on imported Italian gravel that likely cost more than her mother's annual rent back in the city's shadow-choked districts. Nkami was no stranger to hardship. She came from a world where ambition was a luxury and survival was the only true currency. Her mother had spent 20 years scrubbing the floors of indifferent corporations, and her younger brother was a brilliant student whose dreams of university were currently being suffocated by the mounting debt they owed to neighborhood loan sharks, men who measured interest in broken bones. The job posting for the Yi-jun estate had been an anomaly: live-in housemaid, excellent pay, discretion mandatory. What the paper hadn't said, what everyone in Seoul knew, was that the estate belonged to Yi-jun Park. To the public he was a cold, efficient shipping magnate. To the streets, he was the ghost of Seoul, a man who controlled the city's pulse with a velvet glove over a fist of iron. "You're quiet." "That's good," Mrs. Choi, the stern head of staff, had noted during the 5-minute interview. Her eyes had scanned Nkami's dark skin and steady gaze with clinical detachment. "You understand that what you see in this house stays in this house? That speaking out of turn has consequences that no doctor can fix?" Nkami nodded, thinking of her brother's tuition and the shark's threats. She was trading her safety for her family's survival. It was a simple, brutal transaction. By her second day, Nkami realized the estate was a study in architectural intimidation. Underneath the marble floors and priceless Ming vases pulsed a current of absolute terror. The staff moved like wraiths, avoiding eye contact and communicating in a frantic sign language of nods and whispers. They were all terrified of Isabella, Yi-jun's fiancée. Isabella was a woman of polished porcelain beauty and a heart of jagged glass. Nkami had watched her berate a kitchen maid until the girl shook with silent sobs, all because a wine glass had a haze that only Isabella's malice could see. "Don't look at her," May, an older cook, had hissed in the pantry. "She's poison. She's an angel when Master Yi-jun is around, but a demon the second he turns his back." Don't give her a reason to notice you. But Nkami's grandmother, a woman who had marched through the fires of the American civil rights movement before moving abroad, had left her with a different inheritance. Baby girl, she'd often say, there comes a time when you have to choose between being safe and being right. If you choose safety over truth, you aren't living, you're just waiting to die. That strength was tested when Isabella deliberately tripped herself, shattering a priceless ceramic vase, and immediately turned her fury on old man Chin, a gardener who had worked for the Park family for 40 years. Isabella's screams for his execution, for his clumsiness, echoed through the halls. Nkami had seen it all from the balcony she was dusting. She saw the calculation in Isabella's eyes. She saw the terror in Chen's. And then she spoke. Now, sitting in a guest room under guarded observation while Yijun reviewed the security footage, Nkami wondered if her grandmother's lessons were a death warrant. Truth in the house of death was a revolutionary act. The door groaned open after 3 hours of agonizing silence. Mrs. Choi stood there, her face a mask of stone. The master will see you now. Nkami was led into a study that smelled of old paper and expensive tobacco. Yijun Park sat behind a desk of dark obsidian, his eyes fixed on a wall of monitors. He didn't look up. Sit, he commanded. The silence stretched. Finally Yijun turned his chair. His gaze was haunting, the eyes of a man who had seen the worst of humanity and mastered it. The footage confirms your story, he said, his voice a low, melodic vibration. Isabella lied. Chin is innocent. He leaned forward, his shadow falling across Nkami. Why did you do it? You have no loyalty to Chin. You've been here 48 hours. Why risk your life for a lie that didn't involve you? Because the truth shouldn't be a luxury, sir, Nkami replied, her voice cracking but holding. Where I come from, letting an innocent man fall for a lie is the same as pushing him yourself. Yijun studied her as if she were a new species. Honesty is a weakness in my world, Nkami. It's a target. You are either very brave or you are a fool. Perhaps both, sir. A ghost of a smile touched his lips, a terrifying, beautiful sight. Isabella knows you cost her this victory. She is not a woman who forgets. You are under my protection now, but remember, I cannot be in every shadow. Long after Nkami was dismissed, Yijun remained in his study, the footage of the shattered vase playing on a loop. He didn't watch Isabella, he watched Nkami. He watched the way she had stood her ground, the way her hands had shook but her voice had remained iron. Yijun had been raised in a world where betrayal was the baseline. His father, the previous ghost, had taught him that every man has a price. Statistics on organized crime show that internal betrayal accounts for nearly 65% of leadership collapses and syndicates. Yijun had built his empire on that data, trusting no one and ensuring everyone feared him more than they feared his rivals. Isabella had fit his world perfectly. She was the daughter of a powerful political ally, a woman who understood the utility of fear. He had tolerated her cruelty as a necessary trait for a woman in her position. But watching her attempt to destroy Chin, a man who had carried Yijun on his shoulders when he was a child, ignited a cold, unfamiliar rage in his chest. It wasn't just the lie, it was the wastefulness of it. Then there was Nkami. Her presence was like a splash of color in a grayscale world. He pulled up her file. Nkami Mbeki. 26. No prior contact with the syndicate. She was a blank slate, yet she possessed a moral compass that pointed north even in the middle of a magnetic storm. His phone buzzed. It was Isabella. That girl needs to be dealt with, Yijun. She humiliated me. If the staff doesn't respect me, your house falls. Yijun stared at the text. He realized then that he had allowed a serpent into his garden, and the serpent was starting to think it owned the soil. He called Wolf, his head of security, a man whose face was a map of scars and unspoken secrets. I want 24-hour surveillance on Isabella, Yijun ordered. And I want Nkami protected. If so much as a hair on her head is harmed, I want the person responsible brought to the basement. Do you understand? Boss, Wolf's voice was hesitant. The fiancée? You're putting a maid above the woman you're supposed to marry? I'm putting the truth above a liability, Wolf. Spread the word. Nkami is mine. Yijun walked to the window, looking out over the sprawling estate. He felt a strange pull toward the young woman. He wanted to see if she would break. In his experience, everyone broke. If he applied enough pressure, or if Isabella did, would Nkami's truth turn into a plea for mercy? He was a scientist of human nature, and Nkami was the most fascinating subject he'd encountered in a decade. 2 nights later, the air in the mansion was heavy with an approaching storm. Nkami was finishing the late-night cleaning of the industrial kitchen, The hum of the refrigerator's the only sound. Or so she thought. You really think you're special, don't you? Kami spun around. Isabella stood in the doorway, draped in a silk robe the color of arterial blood. She held a slender cigarette in one hand and a look of pure, unadulterated hatred in her eyes. She stepped into the room, her heels clicking like a metronome of doom. Master Yijun protected you once, Isabella whispered, her voice a serrated blade. But he is a busy man. He manages ports, ships, and lives. He will forget you by morning. And when he does, I will be here. She moved closer, the scent of her expensive perfume clashing with the smell of lemon floor wax. I know you're kind. You think your honesty makes you better than me. But in this house you are a cockroach. And do you know what I do to cockroaches? Isabella picked up a heavy chef's knife from the magnetic strip on the wall. She tested the edge with her thumb, her eyes never leaving Kami's. Accidents happen in kitchens and Kami. A slip of the hand. A poisoned tea. A fall down the cellar stairs. Seoul's police don't investigate deaths in this house. They just collect the checks Master Yijun sends them. Nkami felt the cold sweat prickling her neck, but she remembered her grandmother's face. She remembered the fire in the old woman's eyes when she faced down the dogs and the hoses. I'm not afraid of you, Miss Isabella, Nkami said, her voice echoing in the vast kitchen. Isabella laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. You should be. I'm going to give you a choice. Tomorrow you go to Yijun. You tell him you lied. You tell him you hate me and wanted to ruin our marriage. You beg for my forgiveness on your knees in front of the entire staff. If you do that, I'll let you live. If you don't. She leaned in, her breath cold against Nkami's ear. I'll make sure your family back home pays the price for your pride. I know about the loan sharks, Nkami. It would be so easy for me to buy your debt, and then tell them to collect. Isabella slammed the knife into the wooden butcher block and walked out, her laughter trailing behind her like a poisonous mist. Nkami stood alone, trembling. The threat to her family was the one thing she hadn't prepared for. Her grandmother had taught her to be brave with her own life, but what about her brothers? What about her mother's? She looked at the knife vibrating in the wood. She realized then that Isabella wasn't just a mean woman. She was a predator who had spent years perfecting the art of breaking people. But as Nkami reached out to steady herself, she noticed something. High in the corner of the kitchen, hidden behind a decorative molding, was a tiny red light. A camera she hadn't noticed before. She didn't know if it was Yijun's or someone else's, but she looked directly into it. She didn't bow. She didn't cry. She simply pulled the knife from the wood and set it back in its place. Unknown to her, in the darkened study, Yijun was watching. He saw the interaction. He heard the threat to her family. He saw Isabella's true face, a face that threatened his control and his sense of order. But more importantly, he saw Nkami's defiance. For the first time in his life, the ghost of Seoul felt a heartbeat that wasn't his own. He realized that Nkami wasn't just a maid and she wasn't just a witness. She was the key to a door he had locked years ago, the door to his own humanity. Wolf, Yijun said into his intercom, his voice deathly quiet. Find the men holding the Mbeki family debt. Buy it. All of it. And then bring me their heads. The game had changed. It was no longer about a broken vase. It was about who would survive the night in a house where the shadows had finally started to speak. The east wing of the park estate was a labyrinth of silent luxury, a section of the mansion that felt more like a museum than a home. Nkami had been assigned to the suite by Mrs. Choi, tasked with a deep clean before the arrival of important guests. A euphemism Nkami had learned meant either high-ranking business partners or other underworld figures. The work was grueling, but Nkami didn't mind. The solitude was a relief. In the week she had spent as a maid for the Ghost of Seoul, she had felt a constant prickling heat on the back of her neck, the unmistakable sensation of being watched. Whether it was by Yijun's security team or Isabella's spiteful eyes, she was never truly alone. She was polishing a heavy mahogany vanity in the dressing room when the acoustics of the old architecture betrayed its inhabitants. The mansion's ventilation system, designed for a different era, acted as a natural megaphone, funneling a conversation from the adjacent private balcony directly into the dressing room. Nkami froze at the sound of Isabella's voice. It wasn't the shrill, performative tone she used when berating the staff. It was a low, urgent hiss, sharpened by an edge of desperate calculation. No, I told you, the meeting has been moved to Friday, Isabella said. Nkami's heart hammered against her ribs. She knew she should drop the cloth and flee, but her feet were rooted to the floor. Yijun changed the location at the last minute, but I found out. They'll be at the warehouse on Pier 7 instead of the restaurant. Yes, I'm certain. He told his underbosses this afternoon. Pause. Nkami held her breath, her own pulse sounding like a drum in her ears. Don't question me, Isabella snapped. I've given you accurate information every time. Your people should be grateful I'm risking everything to provide it. If the Huang family wants to take over this territory, they need to strike now while he's vulnerable. Nkami's blood turned to ice. This was treason. Isabella wasn't just a cruel fiancée, she was a mole for the Park family's primary rivals. The Huang Syndicate was a name even Nkami knew from the hushed whispers in the servants' quarters. They were a powerful organization that had been encroaching on Yijun's shipping lanes for months. Yes, I know what we agreed, Isabella continued, her voice now cold and transactional. But things have gotten complicated. There's a new maid, that African girl, who's causing problems. She's watching me too closely. I need her dealt with before she becomes a real threat. Her name is Nkami. She sleeps in the servants' quarters, east side, third room. It should be easy to arrange an accident before Friday. The casualness of the order, the way her death was discussed like a discarded grocery list, made the room spin. Nkami gripped the edge of the vanity, her knuckles white. Isabella wasn't just planning a coup, she was planning a murder. I don't care how, Isabella whispered. Just make it look natural. The last thing I need right now is Yijun investigating another incident involving me. Make sure your brother's people are ready for Friday. If this goes right, Yijun won't survive the month. The click of heels signaled Isabella's departure. Nkami stood in the shadows of the east wing, paralyzed. She was a witness to a conspiracy that could topple an empire. If she stayed silent, Yijun would die on Friday, and she would likely be killed in her sleep before then. If she spoke up, it would be her word against the future Mrs. Park. In a world governed by power and bloodlines, who would believe a maid? Unknown to Nkami, she wasn't the only one playing a dangerous game. Yijun Park was a man who lived by a singular rule. Trust is a luxury the powerful cannot afford. 3 days before the Friday meeting, Yijun initiated a character audit, a strategy designed by his right-hand man Wolf. It was a centuries-old test of integrity. They would leave a poison gift, an object of immense value, in Nkami's path to see if she would succumb to the temptation that defined most of the people in their world. The object was a jade pendant, a Ming Dynasty artifact from Yijun's mother's private collection. Its value was estimated at over $250,000, yet its emotional value to Yijun was immeasurable. Wolf placed the pendant on a side table in the library, hidden slightly beneath a stack of journals, and assigned Nkami to dust the room. However, the house was a sieve. A security guard named Chin, who had been seduced by Isabella's promises of wealth, tipped her off about the test. Isabella saw an opening. She wouldn't just let Nkami fail, she would ensure she was caught red-handed. Nkami entered the library, her mind still reeling from the conversation she had overheard the night before. She moved mechanically, her eyes scanning the corners for threats. When she reached the side table, she saw it, the deep emerald glow of the jade. She picked it up, feeling the cool weight of history in her palm. She knew immediately this wasn't something meant to be left out. Her first instinct was to find Mrs. Choi. She slipped the pendant into her apron pocket for safekeeping, intending to finish the room and head straight to the housekeeper's office. Stop right there. The library doors burst open. Isabella marched in, flanked by 2 security guards. Her face was a mask of theatrical outrage. Guards? I caught her. I saw her pocket the jade pendant from the master's private collection. One of the guards stepped forward, roughly reaching into Nkami's apron and pulling out the jade. He held it up like a trophy. I wasn't stealing it, Nkami said, her voice trembling but clear. I was securing it. I was going to take it to Mrs. Choi. A likely story, Isabella sneered. Take her to Yijun. Let's see how he handles a thief in his own house. They marched her to the study. Yijun sat behind his desk, the morning light catching the sharp angles of his face. He looked at the pendant, then at Nkami, his expression unreadable. Is this true? Yijun asked quietly. I found it, sir, Nkami said, looking him directly in the eyes. I didn't want it to be lost or broken. I was taking it to the housekeeper. She's lying, Yijun, Isabella pleaded, gripping his arm. She looked around to make sure the room was empty before she took it. She's a criminal. Yijun didn't look at Isabella. Instead, he reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a second jade pendant, identical in every way. He set it on the desk next to the first one. Interesting, Yijun murmured. This pendant, he pointed to the one Nkami had stolen, is a high-quality glass replica. The real one never left my desk. The color drained from Isabella's face. "Wolf," Yijun said, his voice dropping to a dangerous register. "Who knew about this test besides us?" "Only guard Chin, boss," Wolf replied, stepping out from the shadows. "And it seems Chin has been having very long, very private conversations with Miss Isabella lately." The silence in the room was suffocating. Guard Chin was brought in, and under the weight of Yijun's gaze, he crumbled within seconds. He confessed to everything: the bribes, the tips, the alliance with Isabella. "Everyone out," Yijun commanded. "Except Isabella and Wolf. Kami, you are dismissed. For now." Kami fled the room, her legs feeling like water. She had survived, but the victory felt hollow. She had seen the look in Yijun's eyes. It wasn't just anger. It was the cold, calculated look of a man preparing for a war. The following morning, the atmosphere in the estate was brittle. Isabella hadn't been cast out, not yet. In the world of the Mafia, you keep your enemies close until the moment you strike. Kami was summoned to Isabella's private sitting room. She expected another assault, but she found a broken woman. Isabella sat on a silk settee, her eyes red-rimmed, a handkerchief clutched in her hand. "Kami, please," Isabella whispered. "Sit." Kami remained standing. "I've been a monster," Isabella said, her voice cracking. "Yijun told me he's ending the engagement. I'm being sent away. I realized I was jealous of you. Your spirit, your honesty. I tried to destroy you because I've destroyed myself." She reached into her bag and pulled out a thick, padded envelope. She slid it across the marble table. "There is $50,000 in here. It's my way of making amends. Take it, Nkami. I resign today. Go home to your family. Get out of this house before the darkness swallows you too." $50,000. According to recent economic data, the average annual income in Nkami's home region was less than $2,000. This was 25 years of labor in a single envelope. It was her mother's health, her brother's tuition, and her own freedom. "Why give me this now?" Nkami asked. "Because I want one good thing to come from my time here," Isabella sobbed. "Please, just take it and leave. Don't be here on Friday. Just go." It was a brilliant performance. It was an apology wrapped in a bribe, designed to remove the only witness who could confirm Isabella's specific treachery regarding Pier 7. Nkami looked at the envelope. She thought of the accident Isabella had ordered. She thought of the warehouse at Pier 7. If she took the money and left, she would be safe and wealthy, but Yijun and his men would walk into a slaughterhouse. "I can't take this," Nkami said, pushing the envelope back. Isabella's sobbing stopped instantly. Her eyes turned hard as flint. "You stupid, arrogant girl. I'm giving you a lifeline. Do you think Yijun is a hero? He is a butcher. If you stay here, you'll die with him." "Is that a threat or a confession?" Nkami asked. She reached into her apron and pulled out a small, digital recorder she had borrowed from the security office's discarded tech bin. It was active. "I know about Friday," Nkami said firmly. "I know about the Huang family. I know about Pier 7. Isabella lunged across the table, her fingernails clawing for Nkami's face, but the door was kicked open before she could make contact. Wolf and 3 armed guards entered the room. "Master Yijun was right," Wolf said, looking at Isabella with pure disgust. "He said you were too predictable to stay quiet." Wolf turned to Nkami and took the recorder. "You've done well, Nkami. More than you know." As Isabella was dragged screaming from the room, Nkami felt a strange sense of dread. She had chosen her side. She had saved the ghost of Soul. But in doing so, she had stepped fully into the light of his world, a place where the only thing more dangerous than being an enemy was being a confidant. The war for the Park Empire was no longer a whisper in the dark. It was a countdown to Friday, and Nkami was now a soldier she never intended to be. Friday arrived with the oppressive weight of a gathering storm. Yijun had summoned a full family council, an assembly of underbosses and associates under the guise of routine business. In reality, it was the staging ground for a confrontation that would decide the fate of his empire. Nkami spent the day preparing the formal dining hall. Her recording of Isabella's confession had stripped away the traitor's mask. Yijun knew about the impending ambush and Isabella's collaboration with the rival Huang family. Yet, instead of canceling, he chose to let the trap spring, with his own countertrap poised to snap shut. Isabella moved through the room with elegant malice, wearing a red dress that mirrored her predatory confidence. She believed her secret was safe, unaware that her warning to Nkami was the very evidence that would condemn her. Yijun sat at the head of the table, his expression a mask of bored calm. Nkami noticed subtle shifts. The windows were locked and the new serving staff moved with the tactical precision of soldiers. At 10:30 p.m., the scheduled hour of the ambush, a guard whispered to Wolf. This was the moment. The plan dictated an evacuation through a secure exit, directly into the Huang's crosshairs. But Yijun didn't move. He tapped his wine glass, the crystal ring silencing the room. Betrayal is a cancer, he said, his voice cold and terrifying. Tonight we cut it out. He gestured and a hidden door opened. Guard Chin and other compromised security members were let out, followed by Park Min-suk, a captured Huang lieutenant. Min-suk detailed the plot, his testimony turning Isabella's face to ash. This plan was only possible because of an insider, Yijun continued, stopping behind Isabella's chair. My fiancée, Isabella Marino. Amidst the shock, Yijun played Nkami's recording. Isabella's own voice filled the room, offering bribes and warning of bloodshed. Her facade shattered into desperate fury. The Huangs are already here, she hissed. You're all dead. Yijun merely gestured toward the windows. Floodlights illuminated the grounds, showing the Huang forces surrounded by twice their number of Yijun's elite soldiers. The gunfire was brief, the victory absolute. The council's vote was unanimous. Isabella was exiled, stripped of everything. As she was dragged away, she spat at Nkami. This is your fault. No, Yijun replied. This is your fault because you believed cruelty was strength. Nkami simply refused to participate in your lies. In the wake of the final supper, Yijun initiated the purge. Every guard, staff member, and associate was scrutinized. Isabella's web of informants was dismantled. Yet for the loyal staff, the atmosphere changed from terror to liberation. Old Man Chin became a legend, his granddaughter's surgery funded by Isabella's seized assets. Mrs. Choi, the household manager, approached Nkami with a rare look of respect. I watched that woman break people for years and did nothing, she admitted. You stood up when no one else would. We are all grateful. 3 weeks later, Yijun called an unprecedented household meeting. He stood before the cooks, drivers, and maids and did something the Ghost of Seoul never did. He apologized. I allowed a culture of fear to exist. That was my failure, he declared. From now on, this house operates on respect and earned loyalty. He then called Nkami forward. You were hired for a temporary low-paying job. Yet you risked everything for the truth. He held up an ornate key. Mrs. Choi is retiring. She has recommended you as her replacement. As of today, you are the head of household. The room erupted in applause. Nkami, once a maid, now held authority over the entire estate's operations and budget. Will you accept? Yijun asked. This house needs someone who values truth over comfort. Nkami thought of her grandmother's lessons. Yes, sir, she said. I'll do my best. Mrs. Choi handed her the operational tablet with a smile. You have the courage to speak truth to power. Don't ever lose that. 2 months later, Nkami stood on the West Wing balcony, overseeing the gardens she now managed. She had implemented fair schedules, grievance procedures, and an open-door policy. The House of Death had become a place of dignity. Yijun joined her, a habit they had formed during their frequent discussions on leadership. Efficiency is up and costs are down, he remarked. You've exceeded every expectation. I'm just treating people the way I'd want to be treated, Nkami replied. Yijun looked out at the horizon. I built an empire on the belief that trust is a weakness. I trusted Isabella because she was as ruthless as I was. I didn't see that those qualities made her the perfect traitor. He turned to her. You showed me that integrity isn't a luxury, it's a foundation. That is a radical idea in my world. Kami smiled. My grandmother used to say, truth is like the sun. You can shut it out for a time, but it isn't going away. Yijun laughed. I would have liked to meet her. He then grew serious. The debt you took this job to pay? It's cleared. You are free to leave Nkami. You are here by choice now. Nkami considered the path behind her. She had come to survive, she had stayed to lead. She looked at the staff moving through the gardens below, relaxed, safe, and respected. I think I'll stay, she said. There's still work to do. Even in a house of shadows? Especially here, she said. That's where light is needed most. As Yijun left, Nkami felt a profound sense of peace. She had changed the world of the Ghost of Seoul not with a weapon, but with the simplest, most difficult thing of all, the truth.